Okay, so for the sake of the length of the video, I decided to cut it where it was, and I'll start off with I was just going into who are these people that have these sinister agendas against the body of Christ. So let me first share my screen with you all. All right, so we're going to start here at Matthew 23 and 31. And I'm not trying to be preachy or anything. I have to pretty much point this stuff out in the Bible to tie it all together. I want you all to see it for yourselves, because sometimes when people just say things, people don't, necessarily believe it or think it's far fetched or whatnot. So I wanted to show you all for yourself. So Matthew 23 and 31. This is Jesus speaking to the Pharisees, and he says, "Wherefore ye be witnesses unto yourselves that ye are the children of them that killed the prophets. Fill ye up then the measure of your fathers, ye serpents, ye generation of vipers. How can you escape the damnation of hell?" So I was always under the impression, and I've even heard it preached in church, that when he referred to the serpents, the generation of vipers, that Jesus was actually referring to the backslidden Pharisees that were hypocrites and that were very judgmental and were puffed up and full of themselves and looked down on everyone else. However, when you really look into this, he says, "Be witnesses of yourselves that you're the children of them." So, children. Let's see what he meant there. That you are the children. You are the sons. Apparently, a primary word, a son. So you are remote kinship, figurative kinship, son or child. It says remote or figurative here. But so he's calling them the son of them that killed the prophet. And then he goes on to call them serpents, which is a snake. It can be figuratively or an actual snake, especially an artful, malicious person, especially Satan, or a serpent. But then he says, "You generation of vipers." This literally means offspring. So I'm going to look that up. And offspring means to procreate properly of the father, but by extension of the mother, figuratively to regenerate, to bear, to beget, to born, bring forth, conceive, be delivered of, gender, make, or spring. So just like Jesus was the only begotten Son of God, he's talking to actual offspring or begotten sons of the enemy, not just backslidden Pharisees. But then you wonder, how could they be Pharisees? We know that in order to be a Pharisees and preach and teach in the synagogue, you had to be Jewish descent. So this tells us that the Jewish bloodline had to get mingled with the seed of the serpent. So let's go back and see if we can find out where that took place in Genesis. So I'm going to go to Genesis 49. And in Genesis 49, this is when Jacob, right before his passing, he blessed his 12 sons. And so he blesses all his sons, but when he gets to Dan, it's very interesting. So he calls Dan here in Genesis 49 and 17, "Dan should be a serpent by the way, an adder in the path that bites the horse's heel, so that its riders shall fall backwards." So He calls Dan a serpent along the way, along the side of the road, an adder in someone's path that bites the horse's heel and causes the rider of the horse to fall back. So let's see what he means by serpent. He actually means a snake. And so this is very interesting because the 12 tribes that were blessed at the time, I'll just read them all here versus reading the actual passage. But it was Reuben, Simeon, Judah, Zebulun, Issachar, Dan, Gad, Naphtali, Asher, Joseph, Benjamin, and Levi. These were the 12 tribes in Genesis 49 that were blessed. But once again, pay attention to Dan being called a snake along the path. So now we're going to Revelation 7. This is when the 144,000 were being sealed with the seal of God on their foreheads. And out of these 12 tribes here, we have the tribe of Judah, we have Reuben, Gad, Asher, Naphtali, Manasseh, Simeon, Levi, Issachar, Zebulun, Joseph, and Benjamin. So we see here that the tribe of Dan is gone. The tribe of Dan is no longer in Genesis 49. So when we go back, remember in Matthew 23 and 33, the Lord said, how can you escape hell? He said, you're the seed of the offspring that killed the prophet. And then he goes even on further to say that they will continue to kill his prophets that he sends in his synagogues and everything. So let's go back. He says, wherefore, behold, I send unto you prophets and wise men and scribes, and some of them ye shall kill and crucify, and some of them shall ye scourge in your synagogues and persecute them from city to city. So he was saying that even after that this particular generation will still be, this particular group of Pharisees will still be the ones that killed the prophets, the ones in the past and the future prophets. Now, we know that all Pharisees were not evil. We know that Nicodemus realized he was God, and in secret he converted, and he was a believer. And there was more that also believed, but this is telling us that by Dan being blessed, or if you call that a blessing in Genesis, and being called a snake along the side of the road, and then Jesus says here, how can you, generation of vipers, escape the damnation of hell? And then we know that they are not mentioned in Revelations. We can pinpoint that the enemy came in through the tribe of Dan. If we go even further, I'm not going to touch on it today, but if we go even further, I recommend that you read Joshua 18, where Joshua was casting lots and dividing the land amongst all the tribes. Then you go over to Judges 18, the very next book, go to Judges 18, and you will see that the tribe of Dan did not inherit, or they didn't take their lot. They went ahead and it was 600 men. They went to a town, burnt it down, slaughtered everyone in the town, burnt it down, built up their own city, and they went to this man named Micah's house and stole his household gods. They stole his God, they stole his carved images, and they took his priest. He had a backslidden Levite priest living with him as the priest for his house. And they went and took that priest and said, you can be the priest over us. It was 600 of them. And so that priest left and went with them. And that very last verse says that even though the Lord and the Ark of the Covenant was in Shiloh, they left and they started like worshiping their own gods. So we don't really hear about Dan again after that. Now, when you go to Ezra 9, you will see in Ezra 9 where the holy seed, where the Lord tells the people that the holy seed had been mixed with the seeds of the enemy, and some Jewish people had taken Canaanite wives, and wives of that were descendants of the enemy, had taken them on and had children with them. So they were told to, the children of Israel were told to repent at that time and forsake their wife and kids, and I think most of them did, but I mean they already had the children at this point, and so I'm thinking that those children from Ezra 9 are some of the children that were mentioned, that had now grown up and were slaughtering the prophets, because they had to be Jewish, but then they had the bloodline of the enemy as well. So that discusses who these people are. So I believe, oh, I'm sorry, when we go to Revelation 3 and 9, we hear the Lord talk about people that, behold, I will make the synagogue of Satan, that say that they are Jews and are not, but do lie. Behold, I will make them come and worship before thy feet, and to know that I have loved thee. So he's talking at that time to the church of Philadelphia, and he was telling them, he mentioned the synagogue of Satan, people that say they're Jews and are not. So there are some very wealthy people that own a lot of the world's wealth that we believe are wealthy Jews that really are literal seed or descendants of the enemy, that really are into very dark things, very, very dark things, that's almost unbelievable to us. And so this is what this whole agenda is about. This agenda is about to take out as many saints of God, or just people who have not bowed down, because we do have some people that believe, in the Lord, but kind of play both sides of the fence. But this vaccine / RFID chip / mark of the beast agenda is to have a full-on pledge of allegiance to the enemy, and those who will not bow down, will lose their life. And so one thing that I do want to say, because Israel was described as, so I'll just go back right now. I'm just going to go back to my regular screen. So Israel was described as a barren fig tree in the Bible. And then if you all remember, when Jesus actually cursed the fig tree at one point of the Bible, he was walking with the disciples. He went to pick a fig off the tree. The tree was barren, and so he cursed it, and the tree immediately withered away and died. So at that point, this was a representation of Israel. Israel was barren. Israel was supposed to be fruitful, but it was barren. And so Israel actually was cursed and told that they would be scattered, throughout all the land. So when the disciples asked Jesus to give them a sign of his return, he said, no man shall know the day nor the hour that the Son of Man returns, but he pretty much says, I'll give you a sign. And so he starts to discuss signs and wonders and different things that will take place, and to look up, because that means that he is on the way. One of the things that he said is when Israel is restored to the Jews, when the fig tree begins to blossom again, meaning that Israel will be restored back to a nation, that will be a sign of his return. So Israel was restored to the Jews in one day on May 14th, 1948. Israel became restored to the Jews and became a nation. And those who could show that they had Jewish heritage were allowed to actually move back and occupy the land. So that was Israel being restored to the Jews. I wanted to Psalms 90 and 10, I think it is. Yeah. It says here, for the days of our years are 80 old, and if by reason of strength they be 80 years, yet there is strength in there, yet is there strength, labor, and sorrow, for it is soon cut off and we will fly away. So Psalms 90 and verse 10 is telling us that a generation is 80 and 10 years, which basically is 70 years. 80 is 20, 40, 60 plus 10, so 70 years. And then also Isaiah, I believe it's Isaiah 26, but also Isaiah also discusses that a generation is 70 years. But it said, but if by reason of strength, it'll be 80, so 80 years. And after that, it is soon cut off and we fly away. So Israel was restored to the Jews May 14th, 1948, meaning that has been, as of May 14th of this year, means it's 72 years. We're going into the 73rd year after May 14th. So that leaves 7 years before this 80-year generation, because Jesus said that that generation shall not pass before all these things take place and before he returns. So that gives us 7 years pretty much. So, and we still have to account for the 7-year Daniel timeline. There's a 7-year timeline that Daniel gave about a peace treaty in 3.5 years, a time and a half of times, which is the 3.5 years. And then it's also discussed in Revelation about a 1260 day treaty, which is 3.5 years. So, but that's who I believe, these people are, these wealthy billionaires that run most of the world and own most of the wealth. I believe that they are the, from the synagogue of Satan, the Jewish people, the so-called Jews that really are not, but really are quite the opposite.